Hey everybody, what's going on? ShabbyDoo here, and today we're going to talk about everything that we know so far about a new up-and-coming survival game that should be hitting at the end of 22 for early access called Nightingale. So what we know so far is really only from their release trailer or the reveal trailer, and all from their Game Awards at 2021, which is showing the actual initialized thoughts for Nightingale, and it looks great, obviously, and also from an interview from Aaron Flynn from his new studio, Inflexion Game. So what we do know about Nightingale is that the original inspiration of the game was thought to gonna be come out as an MMO, but now they've changed that into what they call a shared world survival game, which we'll go into a little bit more in depth later during the Q&A from Aaron Flynn. But this game is in development by Inflexion Games, as we mentioned, which is actually made up of top talent from the BioWare, which is obviously made some great games like Dragon Age and Mass Effect. So we do know that they have some great RPG factors under their belt, story-driven narratives. So the world itself is not only going to be beautiful, but there should be some great depth to it, right? So that's going to be one of the first things that we can expect well. And then in their own worlds, they describe this as a Victorian gas lamp world. One of the focuses of the team has been on rich world building, like we said, which we know from their other games. And now it's something you'd associate more with an RPG, of course, rather than chopping down trees like they state. But Inflexion wants to create a believable place grounded in a recognizable visual style, but with a magical twist. So, of course, Nightingale is a survival game, so they're going to have the act of gathering resources, building shelters, large shelters, mind you, and fighting enemies will be present and accounted for. Building's going to be a huge part of Nightingale, but rather than having the PvP like you would see in Rust, it's going to be more co-op focused. So the story for Nightingale kind of begins is there's the magical city, which is called Nightingale, which is at the center of all the magical study in the Western world at the turn of the 19th century. And through a sort of cataclysm and apocalypse, the portal network the Nightingale helped construct collapsed and unfortunately left many stranded. So the portal network is going to be a huge part of this game too. It's how we're going to be able to venture through all these different worlds. So loads of people who are not proficient at using this stuff have been a part of it and are now lost in these realms. They have to start to survive. This is the setup and the mystery behind what the initial storytelling will be for the game that is Nightingale, which is very exciting that we've got a good storyline premise, not just like, hey, we're in the middle of the woods. We're actually going to have some diverse biomes and clear objectives, but with all the choices being on us on how we want to get there. So us as the player, we're going to be stranded in an alien world after being cut off by the sudden collapse of the network of the arcane portals. Our ultimate goal is to power up the portals and make our way back to the magical city of Nightingale, which they've noted actually exists physically in this world. It's a true place. It's not a metaphorical ending. We do get there, but it's not actually the end of the game. They consider it going to be what the end game content, but they don't want it to be like the end all. It's just going to be one of the main objectives. So one of the big in-depth parts of this system will be the magic system. So obviously the worlds we're stuck in is what we call the Fae realm. And the Fae have been silently watching and manipulating humanity for allegedly thousands of years, but they've only made themselves and their magic known in the past century. But because magic's a force to be coveted, not everyone has access to it. So we're not going to be starting this game with magic ourselves. We're not going to be out here hurling meteors or starting lightning storms or conjuring up all sorts of healing spells. We're going to have to start off just like everyone else. We're going to be out here chopping down our own trees, making a wooden hut. Our first objective, like in every survival game, it's going to be survival, right? That mundane kind of nitty-gritty survival that we all thrive for in the beginning, with a ever-increasing, let's just say, alleged tier system to get us further along and also get access to some magics. Now, they haven't gone into any depth on this magic system. A lot of things there's not a lot of depth on. It's just kind of some talking points or hot topics, but they're really getting the nitty-gritty out here so that we can understand what the game is and what it's going to be made out of. So as we mentioned, there is an end all. So one of the big questions is there going to be a main quest line? Like, are they going to make this essentially an RPG with survival aspects, or is this going to be a survival game with RPG aspects? And obviously, those are two very different things. Outward is a game that comes to my mind when I hear about RPGs with a survival aspect, because there was crafting, there was some survival aspects in there, but they were so minimal that it was an RPG and not a survival crafter. Whereas this hope is obviously to make sure that they stick to the open world survival crafter notion with some strong aspects of some good, tangible NPCs with great backbone to them. And with that, they want to have depth in their NPCs. Aaron Flynn talked about this a little bit, where they want to engage them with in various ways, but not to have, like, the standard MMO question mark above their head. Hey, come here, do this, go grab me 10 of these, kill 5 of those. So they really want to build a live world, but based around your choices in said world. Now, one of the main choices you do have is they talk about there's a giant that you have to make decisions to help or not in the beginning of the game, and that choice has consequences and effects. So my thought is that there may be different races within the Fey world, just as we would expect. Perhaps, let's just say, obviously the giant race, we've got maybe like the Fey themselves. I don't know if that's what they call, but like the fairy race, where it's like the little pixies, or perhaps like the Trents. So like maybe certain notions build sociability within those constructs, and then you get negative relations towards other the more friendly you are towards some, or if you help some, it creates negative impact on one side but positive on the other. So I'm hoping to see a lot of these good and bad consequences with our choices in a game like this, because they emphasize there are going to be NPCs, there are going to be available quests to get materials and other craftables like that. So, and they plan to have good depth of characters and not just some guy standing in a corner, And they did talk about the customization with this a bit, because they wanted to emphasize that this is a fantasy world. They don't want it to be like, the boring, I'm out here running around in rags with my ass cheeks hanging out. So with that, they talked about having customization through the course of gameplay. So many outfits, colors, and choosing all that kind of things. They want to demonstrate that the players are in a fantasy world, and for that to be exaggerated and have slick outfits and shit that just doesn't make sense. Like if you notice in the trailer, you can see one of the creatures on there have like some crazy little like white and gold goat mask kind of thing on, or Fey mask on. So I'm hoping to see some like awesome fantasy eccentric outfits that may not actually fit into your normal survival crafter sense, but we've got like a more Victorian world. So we're getting towards a world that is actually civilized, but some sort of catastrophe happened where we're out in the survival aspect world. So maybe we can look like we're from the Hunger Games in District 1, or from the Capitol. So I did want to talk about a couple of the questions they asked directly and give Aaron Flynn's answers on these. But if you're loving Nightingale and you do hope to see some more content on this, make sure you do hit that like button down below. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think of so far of the trailer and everything that is available. And do hit that subscribe button as well, because this is a game we're going to follow very closely. I'm going to be keeping my eye on this one because I've got some good hopes for this game. With the game not releasing towards the end of the year for early access, obviously there might be a limited content availability, but we're going to do as best as we can. So one of the questions asked was, there's no shortage of crafting games lately. How do you plan to make yours stand out? Which is very true. There's so many out there, and so many are so bad. But what's important is that we create a backdrop that offers an abundance of choice as well as tools to be able to embark on an adventure that feels unique to the individual. So that kind of rounds back up to like, are there going to have main quests? No, there's going to be quests, but they're not going to be driving the story. So everyone's not going to follow into the same path. They do hope to see people come across each other in the world. So they didn't go into note on how exactly the multiplayer would work, but because it's a shared open world, I would expect it to kind of be in one of those instances where you can just be out and about and you can see other people and maybe interact in some ways. They did mention there is PvP, but they didn't say to what extent just yet. So another question was, you've said that Nightingale is focused on exploration and players will be able to explore a lot of different realms. How big are the realms? And did they use procedural generation in any way to build them? Which is a great question. When you hear that there's 100 worlds or 1,000,000 worlds or infinite worlds, it's just like, okay, how big are they? They're obviously all going to be the same if they're that big. You can't just make that many unique worlds. But what they had to say was, rather than a singular map, players have access to a multitude of realms, each with their own look, feel, and creatures and challenges. So what that tells me is maybe we'll get something that are like, let's just call them biomes for the minute. Like they said worlds, but like if we think a standard survival aspect, we're going to have different subsets of worlds that'll give us all the different creatures and actually make it unique. Now, I'm wondering if we'll get to choose where we get to start out, if it'll be random, or how that's going to be, and then how we use the portal systems to get across more. They talked about the portal systems a little bit, but they didn't go into depth because they're not quite sure how they want to utilize them yet, where if it's going to be for like world hopping to these different realms or possibly to different multiplayer worlds. So more to come on that. The next one was one of the features we've already seen is the player's ability to choose how to deal with the giant, for example. Are there going to be any specific karma-like bonus or malice side effects to choosing one way or another? We kind of talked about this a little bit on my take, but what Aaron had to say was, it starts with offering that choice to the players. From there, choices are only meaningful if they have consequences. How those consequences play out depends, but we'll have more to share on that in the future. So, like I said, they're going to have some sort of balance system on your choices for good versus bad, but we don't know quite yet. But we do know it's going to be there. And like I said, I expect to see that kind of stuff in a game like this when it's made by a bunch of people from BioWare, right? Like that's kind of something they're really well known for. So, and the last question they had was, or that not the last question, but just the question that I took more note of was, some in development games are being upgraded to Unreal Engine 5. Did you evaluate such an opportunity for Nightingale? Because obviously that's a big contention point for a lot of people right now, especially gamers, is seeing this come out. So what they said is, we're always excited to see evolving technologies and tools, as well as the ways in which other developers utilize them to push the boundaries in game design. When the time is right for a game, they'll take a look. So it's a pretty placated answer, pretty much no at the moment, but as they get further into development, will they try and change it up? Perhaps. These guys are all, especially Aaron, I think he was at BioWare for about 17 or so years. So, I mean, and he managed teams there. So he's not unfamiliar with this interview process. So it's not like a new indie developer having an interview and, blurting out nonsense or things they can't actually hold to. These guys come prepared. They know what kind of questions to expect. They have their answers prepared. And obviously, especially about Unreal Engine 5, they definitely know they're going to get asked about that. They're obviously not working in it now, perhaps later, but we'll just have to see more to come on that. They're not going to erroneously kind of put a carrot out for people. They're going to say what they know and just essentially say, we're working on the others and we'll let you know when we have more details, which is good and bad. But I'm very excited for Nightingale. I hope you guys are too. And like I said, as we get some more content and updates, we'll keep updating the community as well. So if you do want to see them, make sure you do smash that subscribe button down below. But all right, guys, as usual, this has been ShabbyDoo, and the rest of your day is not too shabby.